In the freezing streets of Boston, four 5-year-old twins beg billionaire CEO Michael Sterling for food outside an upscale restaurant. What starts as a simple joke, "Watch my car for leftovers," becomes an extraordinary test of courage when thieves target his Bentley. These forgotten children risk everything to protect a stranger's car, calling police and blocking wheels with their tiny hands. Moved by their incredible loyalty, Sterling doesn't just give them food, he gives them a home through adoption. But medical tests reveal a truth that will shatter everything he thought he knew about his past. DNA results show these brave little warriors aren't just his adopted sons, they're his biological children from a relationship he never knew produced life. In one miraculous moment, Sterling discovers he hasn't just saved 4 homeless boys. He's found the family he and his infertile wife have desperately prayed for all along. Please like and comment below. Your engagement helps us share more incredible true stories of hope and redemption. The Bentley's engine purred to silence as Michael Sterling pulled up to Le Bernardin, Boston's most exclusive French restaurant. Snow swirled violently outside, turning the December evening into a winter wonderland that looked beautiful from inside luxury cars, but brutal for anyone caught without shelter. At 42, Michael had everything money could buy: a business empire worth $3.2 billion, a penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, and a reputation as the city's most successful tech entrepreneur. He stepped out of his car, the leather soles of his Italian shoes crunching on the fresh snow. The valet hadn't arrived yet, unusual for such an upscale establishment, but Michael didn't mind. He had 15 minutes before his dinner meeting with potential Japanese investors. Enough time to grab a quick coffee and review his presentation notes. That's when he saw them. 4 small figures huddled together near the restaurant's side wall, partially hidden by decorative bushes. They couldn't have been older than 5 or 6, identical in their smallness and vulnerability. One torn blanket covered all 4 of them, and Michael could see their breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. Their clothes were layers of mismatched items, clearly hand-me-downs or charity donations that had seen better days. The boldest of the 4, a boy with sandy brown hair peeking out from under a knit cap, stepped forward. His eyes were bright blue, striking against his pale, cold-reddened cheeks. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice small but determined. "Do you have anything for us to eat? We're really hungry." Michael's first instinct was to look around for their parents, but the street was empty except for passing cars. These children were alone. The other 3 remained huddled together, watching their brother with a mixture of hope and fear. One was trying to stop his teeth from chattering, while another had his tiny arms wrapped protectively around the smallest of the group. "Where are your parents?" Michael asked gently, crouching down to their eye level, despite the snow soaking through his expensive suit pants. "Don't have any," the spokesman replied matter-of-factly. "Just us 4. Tommy, Danny, Bobby, and me. I'm Jimmy. We're brothers." Michael's heart clenched. In his world of board meetings, stock options, and corporate acquisitions, he'd forgotten that children could face such harsh realities. He glanced at his Rolex, 12 minutes until his meeting. The investors from Tokyo had flown in specifically for this dinner, representing a potential $500 million deal for his latest AI technology. But looking at these 4 pairs of bright blue eyes, all identical, all hopeful, all trusting, Michael made a decision that surprised even himself. "Tell you what," he said, pulling out his wallet and extracting a crisp $50 bill. "I need someone to watch my car very carefully while I'm inside this restaurant. Think you 4 can handle such an important job?" He tried to keep his tone light, almost joking. "If you do a good job protecting it, I'll bring you some real food when I come out. Deal?" The 4 boys exchanged glances, and Michael could see a silent conversation happening between them. Finally, Jimmy nodded solemnly. "We'll guard it with our lives, sir. Nobody's gonna touch your car while we're here." "I'll be back in exactly 20 minutes, Michael said, placing the 50 in Jimmy's small, cold hand. "Don't let me down." As he walked toward the restaurant's entrance, Michael couldn't help but smile at how seriously the boys were taking their assignment. Tommy had positioned himself near the front of the Bentley, Danny near the back. Bobby was checking the doors to make sure they were locked, and Jimmy was scanning the street like a tiny security guard. Michael's smile faded as he realized he'd just left 4 homeless children to guard his car in a snowstorm. What kind of person was he becoming? But something about their determination, their unity, and their trust in a complete stranger had touched something deep inside him that he hadn't felt in years. Inside Le Bernardin, the warmth enveloped him immediately. Crystal chandeliers cast elegant light over tables set with the finest china and silver. The maitre d' approached with the usual reverence reserved for their most valued patrons. "Mr. Sterling, your guests from Nakamura Industries have already been seated. Right this way, please." But as Michael followed the maitre d' through the dining room, his mind wasn't on AI algorithms or market projections. It was on 4 small boys standing guard in a snowstorm. Taking their promise to a stranger more seriously than most adults took their business contracts. He had no idea that those 20 minutes would change not just his evening, but the entire course of his life forever. The Nakamura representatives rose as Michael approached their table. Kenji Nakamura, the company's CEO, was a man of 60, with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. His daughter Yuki, serving as the company's chief technology officer, was about Michael's age, brilliant, and known throughout Silicon Valley for her innovative approaches to artificial intelligence. "Sterling-san," Kenji said with a slight bow, extending his hand. "Thank you for meeting us on such short notice. I know Boston weather is not ideal for business dinners." "The pleasure is mine," Michael replied, shaking hands and trying to focus on the conversation. But part of his mind remained outside, with 4 small guards protecting his car. "I've been following Nakamura Industries' work in quantum computing. I believe our AI platform could revolutionize your manufacturing processes." As they settled into their seats, Michael couldn't help but glance toward the window. The snow was falling harder now, and he could just make out small figures moving around his Bentley. Were they okay out there? Should he have brought them inside instead of leaving them in the storm? "Sterling-san?" Yuki's voice brought him back to the present. "You seem distracted. Is everything all right?" Michael forced a smile. "Of course. Just making sure my car is secure in this weather." Kenji chuckled. "Ah, yes. I noticed your beautiful Bentley outside. Very impressive. In Japan, we say a man's car reflects his attention to detail in business." If only he knew, Michael thought, that the car's security was currently in the hands of 4 5-year-old homeless children. The waiter appeared to take their order. Michael requested the restaurant's signature seafood tasting menu, while his mind wandered to what those boys might like to eat. Probably something warm, simple, and filling. He made a mental note to order extra food to take outside. "Our proposal," Yuki began, pulling out a tablet, "involves integrating your neural network software with our quantum processing units. The combination could create the first truly sentient manufacturing AI." Michael nodded, trying to focus on her words. The deal was important, potentially the largest of his career. But every few minutes, his eyes drifted to the window, checking on his tiny security team. Outside, unbeknownst to Michael, drama was unfolding. A man in dark clothing had been watching the Bentley from across the street. Marcus Rodriguez was a professional car thief who specialized in high-end vehicles. He'd been casing the restaurant for weeks, noting the patterns of wealthy patrons who left expensive cars with lazy valets. But tonight was different. Tonight he saw an opportunity too good to pass up. A Bentley Continental GT, probably worth $300,000, sitting unguarded in a snowstorm. The owner was clearly inside the restaurant, probably for at least an hour, based on typical dinner patterns at Le Bernardin. Marcus waited until the street traffic died down, then began his approach. He had the tools to bypass the car's security system in under 2 minutes. Easy money. He didn't notice 4 small figures watching his every move. Jimmy spotted the man first. "Guys," he whispered urgently to his brothers, "see that man walking toward our car? Something's not right about him." Tommy squinted through the snow. "He's got something in his hand. Looks like tools." Danny, the most observant of the 4, noticed the man's behavior. "He keeps looking around, like he doesn't want anyone to see him. Just like when we used to watch people who were up to no good in our old neighborhood." Bobby, the youngest but surprisingly brave, clenched his small fists. "The nice man trusted us to watch his car. We can't let him down." Inside the restaurant, Michael was discussing processing speeds and market applications when he noticed increased police sirens in the distance. Boston always had emergency vehicles moving around, but these sounded close and were getting closer. "As I was saying," Kenji continued, seemingly unbothered by the outside noise, "our preliminary tests show a 340% increase in efficiency when..." The sirens were now directly outside. Through the window, Michael could see flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the snow. His heart began to race as he realized the police activity was centered exactly where he'd left his car and where he'd left 4 innocent children. "Excuse me," Michael said abruptly, standing from the table. "I need to check on something outside immediately." Before Yuki or Kenji could respond, Michael was striding quickly toward the restaurant's exit, his mind racing with terrible possibilities. Had something happened to the boys? Had they been arrested for loitering? Had someone hurt them? As he pushed through the restaurant's heavy doors, the cold air hit him like a physical blow. But what he saw in front of his car stopped him dead in his tracks. 3 police cars surrounded Michael's Bentley, their red and blue lights painting the snowy street in alternating colors. A man in handcuffs was being placed into the back of one cruiser, shouting angrily in Spanish. 2 officers were examining what appeared to be electronic devices scattered on the ground near the car, and standing in a tight group next to the driver's side door were 4 small boys, talking animatedly to a police sergeant who was crouched down at their level, listening intently and taking notes. Michael rushed forward, his heart pounding. "Officers, what's happening here? This is my car, and these are..." He paused, not sure how to explain his relationship to the children. Sergeant Patricia Wells, a 20-year veteran of the Boston Police Department, stood up and turned to face Michael. She was a sturdy woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that had earned respect throughout the force. "You're the owner of this vehicle, sir?" she asked, gesturing toward the Bentley. "Yes, I'm Michael Sterling. I asked these boys to keep an eye on it while I was inside the restaurant. What happened?" Sergeant Wells smiled, a genuine expression of admiration crossing her face. "Mr. Sterling, you have 4 very special young men here. What happened is that these boys just helped us catch Marcus Rodriguez, one of Boston's most wanted car thieves." Michael looked down at the 4 boys, who were beaming with pride despite being covered in snow and shivering from the cold. "Tell him what you did," Sergeant Wells encouraged them. Jimmy stepped forward, his chest puffed out with pride. "Well, sir, we were watching your car real careful like you asked, and we saw this suspicious man coming toward it with tools and stuff. He was acting all sneaky, looking around to make sure nobody was watching him. So I called 911, Danny added, holding up an old flip phone that looked like it had seen better days. "I memorized the number from when we lived at the shelter." Tommy jumped in excitedly. And while Danny was on the phone, I started putting rocks behind all the tires, so even if the bad man got the car started, he couldn't drive away. Bobby, the youngest, pointed toward a nearby car, and I wrote down the license plate of that car over there because the bad man came out of it. And I thought maybe the police would want to know about that too. Sergeant Wells nodded approvingly. The license plate Bobby noted belongs to a stolen vehicle Rodriguez has been using for his thefts. We've been looking for that car for 3 weeks. Michael stood in stunned silence, looking from the police sergeant to the 4 boys and back again. These children who had nothing, who were living on the streets, had risked their own safety to protect his property. But how did you coordinate all this? Michael asked, still trying to process what he was hearing. We made a plan, Jimmy explained matter-of-factly. We've had to take care of each other for a long time, so we know how to work as a team. When we saw the bad man, we figured out real quick who should do what. Tommy's the fastest, so he handled the rocks, Danny added. Bobby has the best memory, so he remembered the license plate. I had the phone, so I called the cops. And Jimmy stayed close to your car to make sure the man didn't get inside before help came. Sergeant Wells looked at Michael with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Mr. Sterling, I have to ask, what's your relationship to these boys? They don't have any identification and they told me they're homeless. Michael felt a wave of shame wash over him. Here he was, worth billions of dollars, and he'd left 4 homeless children to guard his luxury car in a snowstorm while he sat in a warm restaurant discussing business deals. I just met them tonight, he admitted. They approached me asking for food, and I asked them to watch my car while I attended a business dinner. He expected judgment from the sergeant, but instead, she smiled. Well, you couldn't have chosen better guards. These boys showed more courage and loyalty in 20 minutes than most adults show in a lifetime. One of the other officers approached Sergeant Wells. Sarge! Rodriguez had about $15,000 worth of car theft equipment with him. This was clearly a professional operation. If these kids hadn't intervened, that Bentley would be in pieces at a chop shop by morning. Michael looked at his car, then at the 4 boys who had saved it. They were still shivering, still covered in snow, still wearing clothes that were clearly inadequate for Boston's winter weather, but they were smiling, proud of what they'd accomplished, proud that they'd kept their promise to him. Mr. Sterling, Sergeant Wells said quietly, I need to know what's going to happen to these boys now. They can't stay on the streets in this weather. Do they have anywhere to go? Michael looked into 4 pairs of identical blue eyes, all watching him hopefully. These children had just proven they were more trustworthy, more loyal, and more courageous than most of the business associates he'd known for years. They're coming home with me, Michael said without hesitation. The words surprised him as much as everyone else. Sergeant Wells raised an eyebrow. Mr. Sterling, I appreciate the gesture, but taking in 4 children isn't something you decide on impulse. There are legal procedures, background checks, social services. Then we'll start those procedures tomorrow, Michael said firmly. Tonight. These boys have earned the right to sleep somewhere warm and safe. They've earned the right to have someone take care of them, the way they took care of something that belonged to me. He crouched down to the boy's level, just as Sergeant Wells had done. If you want to, you can come stay at my house. You'll have warm beds, hot food, and clothes that actually fit. But I need to know, do you want that? The 4 boys looked at each other, having another of their silent conversations. Finally, Jimmy spoke for all of them. Mr. Sterling, we don't have anybody else. We've been taking care of each other for as long as we can remember. If you're sure you want us, then we'd like to come with you. As Michael looked at these 4 extraordinary children, he had no idea that he was about to embark on a journey that would not only change their lives forever, but reveal a truth about his own past that would shake him to his very core. The drive to Michael's Beacon Hill townhouse was quiet, except for the soft hum of the Bentley's heater and occasional whispered conversations between the four boys in the back seat. Michael had left his business dinner abruptly, sending his apologies to the Nakamura representatives and promising to reschedule. For the first time in his career, a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars took second place to something more important. Sergeant Wells had given him temporary custody of the boys for the night, with the understanding that social services would be involved first thing in the morning. She'd also provided him with a card for Dr. Sarah Chen, a pediatrician who specialized in working with homeless children, and Elena Rodriguez, a social worker who could help navigate the legal aspects of what Michael was attempting to do. "Is this really your house?" Tommy whispered in awe as they pulled up to the elegant four-story brownstone with its distinctive bow front and gas lamp-lit entrance. "It's beautiful," Bobby added, pressing his face to the window. "It looks like something from a movie." Michael smiled, seeing his home through their eyes. He'd purchased the townhouse 5 years earlier for $12 million, mainly because it was close to his downtown office and represented the kind of success he thought he wanted. But he'd rarely truly appreciated its beauty until now. "Come on," he said, getting out and opening their door. "Let's get you inside where it's warm." The boys climbed out carefully, still staying close together. Michael noticed how they instinctively formed a protective circle, with Jimmy and Tommy on the outside, Danny and Bobby in the middle. It was clearly a formation they'd developed over time to keep each other safe. Inside, the townhouse was everything money could buy: marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork worth more than most people's yearly salaries. But it was also cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. It was the home of a successful bachelor who worked 16-hour days and had never really thought about what makes a space feel like a family lived there. The boys stood in the entryway, dripping snow onto the expensive marble, looking around with wide eyes but careful not to touch anything. "This is your living room," Michael said, gesturing to a space filled with modern furniture in neutral colors. "And through there is the kitchen. Are you hungry?" 4 heads nodded in unison. In the kitchen, Michael realized he had a problem. His refrigerator contained leftover takeout from expensive restaurants, some imported cheese, and a bottle of champagne. His pantry held protein bars, gourmet coffee, and little else that would appeal to hungry 5-year-olds. "What do you boys usually like to eat?" he asked, feeling suddenly inadequate. "Anything," Jimmy said quickly. "We're not picky, sir. We're grateful for whatever you have." "Mac and cheese is good," Danny added hopefully, "if you have any." Or peanut butter sandwiches," Tommy chimed in. "We had hot dogs once," Bobby said dreamily. "They were really good." Michael's heart clenched again. These children were grateful for basic foods that most kids took for granted. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant, Margaret, who'd been working with him for 8 years and was used to unusual requests. "Margaret, I need you to arrange for a grocery delivery tonight. Emergency situation." "Sir, it's past 10 p.m. Most grocery stores are closed, and it's snowing heavily. Pay whatever premium is necessary. I need kid-friendly food: mac and cheese, hot dogs, peanut butter, jelly, bread, milk, cereal, fruit, vegetables that children actually eat. Also, I need clothes for 4 5-year-old boys: pajamas, underwear, socks, pants, shirts, sweaters, coats. Size, I'm not sure. Average for 5-year-olds. And toiletries, children's toothbrushes, toothpaste, shampoo. Sir, may I ask what's going on?" Michael looked at the 4 boys who were still standing politely in his kitchen, waiting to be told what to do. "I'll explain tomorrow. Just please make this happen as quickly as possible." "I'll have everything delivered within 2 hours," Margaret said efficiently. "I'll use the premium service and the children's clothing store on Newbury Street. They have someone on call for emergency situations." While they waited for the delivery, Michael did what he could with what he had. He made peanut butter sandwiches using expensive artisanal peanut butter and imported French bread. He found some apple juice and heated it up to make a warm drink. It wasn't much, but the boys acted like it was a feast. "This is really good peanut butter," Jimmy said appreciatively. "Tastes different than what we usually get at the shelter." "You boys lived in a shelter?" Michael asked gently. "Sometimes," Danny replied, "when there was room. Other times we had to sleep outside or in places we could find." "How long have you been on your own?" The four boys exchanged one of their meaningful looks. It was Tommy who answered. "We don't really remember having parents. There was a lady named Mrs. Patterson who took care of us for a while when we were little, but she got sick and had to go to the hospital. After that, we just took care of each other." "Don't you have any family? Grandparents, aunts, uncles?" "Just us," Bobby said simply. "We're family." As Michael listened to their matter-of-fact acceptance of their situation, he felt something shifting inside him. These children had faced more hardship in their 5 years than he'd experienced in his entire privileged life, yet they weren't bitter or angry. They were grateful, protective of each other, and incredibly brave. The food delivery arrived first, followed an hour later by clothing and supplies. Michael found himself enjoying the simple task of putting away groceries while the boys watched with fascination. When had he last done something so normal, so domestic? "Okay," he said when everything was organized. "Let's get you boys cleaned up and into some warm pajamas, then we'll figure out sleeping arrangements." The townhouse had 4 bedrooms, but 3 of them were barely furnished. Michael's master bedroom, a guest room with a queen bed, his office, and what was supposed to be a formal dining room that he'd never used. "Do you boys mind sharing a room?" he asked. "I can have more beds delivered tomorrow, but for tonight." "We always sleep together," Jimmy said. "We feel safer that way." "Can we all fit in that big bed?" Danny asked, pointing toward the guest room. "Absolutely." As Michael helped the boys get ready for bed, he was struck by how efficiently they worked as a team. One would help another with buttons, someone else would make sure everyone brushed their teeth properly, and they automatically organized their new clothes in neat piles. They were like a small, well-functioning family unit. "Mr. Sterling," Bobby asked, as Michael tucked them into the guest room bed, all 4 boys lined up like small soldiers. "You can call me Michael." "Mr. Michael, are you sure you want us to stay here? We know we're just kids, and we don't have anything to give you back." Michael sat on the edge of the bed, looking at 4 pairs of identical blue eyes, reflecting trust and hope. "You boys gave me something tonight that was more valuable than my car, more valuable than any business deal I've ever made. You kept a promise to someone you barely knew. You risked your own safety to protect something that belonged to me. That's not something you can buy or earn, that comes from who you are inside." "We always keep our promises," Tommy said sleepily. "We take care of what's important," Danny added, his eyes already drooping. Within minutes, all 4 boys were fast asleep, unconsciously moving closer together in the big bed until they formed a small, protective circle even in sleep. Michael stood in the doorway for a long time, watching them breathe peacefully. For the first time in years, his house didn't feel empty. It felt like it might actually become a home. He had no idea that these 4 sleeping children were about to reveal a secret that would change everything he thought he knew about his own life. Michael barely slept that night. He kept checking on the boys, making sure they were warm, that they were really there, that this wasn't some elaborate dream. At 6 a.m., he was in his kitchen making coffee when he heard soft voices from upstairs. By the time he reached the guest room, the boys were already up, making the bed with military precision. Their new clothes were laid out neatly, and they'd clearly tried to wash their faces in the bathroom sink. "Good morning," Jimmy said when he saw Michael. We didn't want to mess up your nice house, so we tried to clean everything up." "You don't have to do that," Michael said gently. "This is your home now, too. You're allowed to be comfortable here." The concept seemed foreign to them, but they nodded politely. Over breakfast, actual pancakes that Michael had attempted with varying degrees of success, he explained what would happen that day. "A lady from social services is coming to talk to us at 10 o'clock. Her name is Elena Rodriguez, and she's going to help us figure out how to make this arrangement official. Then we're going to see a doctor named Dr. Chen, who wants to make sure you're all healthy." "Are you going to change your mind about us?" Danny asked quietly. "Are we too much trouble?" Bobby added. Michael set down his coffee cup and looked at each of them seriously. "Boys, I want you to understand something. Yesterday, I had everything money could buy, but I was missing something important without even realizing it. You four have brought something into my life that I didn't even know I needed. I'm not changing my mind." "What about your wife?" Tommy asked. "Won't she be upset that you brought us home?" Michael felt a familiar pang. "I don't have a wife right now. It's just me in this big house. But I do have someone special in my life. Her name is Catherine, and I think she's going to love you boys as much as I already do." Elena Rodriguez arrived precisely at 10. A warm-faced woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes that had seen enough to be compassionate but realistic. She spent an hour talking to the boys individually, then spoke privately with Michael. "Mr. Sterling, I have to be honest with you. What you're proposing is unusual. Single adoption of 4 siblings by someone with no parenting experience, no family support system visible, and a demanding career. It raises some red flags." "What would happen to them if I don't adopt them?" Michael asked. Elena sighed. "The chances of keeping all 4 together are slim. Most families want 1 child, maybe 2. 4 siblings, especially boys who are closely bonded like these 4, are very difficult to place together. Then they'd be separated, most likely. And at 5 years old, they're still young enough to be adoptable. But that window closes quickly. By 8 or 9, their chances drop significantly." Michael felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest. "That's not happening. These boys stay together and they stay with me. What do I need to do to make that official?" Dr. Chen's examination took place that afternoon at her clinic in downtown Boston. She was a petite Asian woman with a gentle manner that immediately put the boys at ease. "I need to check how healthy you boys are," she explained. "It's just like getting a checkup. Nothing scary." The examination revealed what Michael had suspected. The boys were underweight, showed signs of chronic mild malnutrition, and had some minor health issues consistent with children who'd lived on the streets, but overall they were remarkably healthy and resilient. "I want to run some standard blood tests," Dr. Chen told Michael privately. "Nothing concerning, just routine checks for anemia, vitamin deficiencies, that sort of thing. I'll also need to establish their medical history, which might be challenging given their background." "Do whatever you need to do to make sure they're okay," Michael said. "Money is no object." That evening, Catherine Walsh came for dinner. Michael had met her 8 months earlier at a charity fundraiser, and they'd been dating steadily since. She was 38, a successful interior designer, and had been trying to get pregnant for the past 3 years of her previous marriage. The divorce had been finalized just before she met Michael, partly due to her ex-husband's unwillingness to pursue fertility treatments. "Michael, you didn't tell me you were babysitting," she said with a smile when she saw 4 small boys peeking shyly around the corner. "I'm not babysitting. Catherine, I'd like you to meet Jimmy, Tommy, Danny, and Bobby. Boys, this is Catherine." As Michael explained the previous night's events, he watched Catherine's face carefully. He'd fallen in love with her kindness, her warmth, her dreams of having a family. But 4 instant children was a lot to ask anyone to accept. Catherine listened to the entire story without interrupting. Then she crouched down to the boy's level. "You 4 protected Michael's car from a real criminal?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Jimmy replied. "We worked as a team." "And you've been taking care of each other all by yourselves?" "We're good at it," Danny said proudly. "We always look out for each other." Catherine stood up, tears in her eyes. "Michael, these boys are extraordinary. If you're serious about adopting them, I want to help." "Are you sure? This is a huge change from what we talked about regarding our future." Catherine smiled, the first genuine smile Michael had seen from her in months. "We talked about wanting a family. We just never imagined it might come to us this way." That night, after Catherine had left and the boys were asleep, Michael sat in his office reviewing the legal documents Elena had given him. The adoption process would take several months, including home visits, psychological evaluations, and background checks. His phone rang. Dr. Chen's name appeared on the caller ID. "Mr. Sterling, I have the boys' blood test results. Everything looks good. They're healthy children who just need good nutrition and care. But I do have one unusual finding." "What kind of finding?" "The boys' blood work shows some interesting genetic markers. I'd like to run a more comprehensive DNA panel, partly for their medical history, but also, well, this might sound strange, but their genetic profile shows some unusual patterns that might help us identify their biological family." Michael felt his heart skip a beat. "What kind of patterns?" "Without getting too technical, their DNA shows markers that suggest Northern European ancestry, specifically Irish and Scottish lineage, with some very distinct genetic signatures. It's the kind of profile that might be useful if we ever tried to locate biological relatives." After hanging up, Michael sat in the darkness of his office, thinking. He'd grown up knowing very little about his own biological father, who'd left when Michael was 2. His mother had remarried when he was 5, and his stepfather had been wonderful, but Michael had always wondered about his biological roots. His own ancestry was Irish and Scottish. He'd had genetic testing done 2 years ago for health reasons, and the results had shown very specific markers that the genealogy company said were relatively rare. But that was probably just a coincidence. Boston had a large Irish and Scottish population. Lots of people shared similar ancestry. Still, something about Dr. Chen's call nagged at him as he finally went to bed. Something about genetic signatures and unusual patterns. He fell asleep wondering if there were more surprises ahead than he could possibly imagine. 3 weeks later, Michael's life had transformed completely. The townhouse that had once been a pristine showcase of expensive furniture and artwork was now filled with the sounds of children, laughter, running footsteps, and the constant chatter of 4 boys who were discovering what it felt like to have a real home. Margaret had arranged for a full-time housekeeper, Mrs. O'Brien, a cheerful Irish woman in her 60s who had raised 6 children of her own. She'd taken one look at the 4 boys and declared them angels sent from heaven, even if they do track mud through the house. "Mr. Sterling," she said one morning as she prepared breakfast while the boys got ready for their first day at Beacon Hill Elementary School. "Those boys are settling in like they were meant to be here. It's like watching puzzle pieces fall into place." Michael smiled, watching through the kitchen window as the 4 boys played in the small backyard, their laughter echoing off the brick walls. The adoption papers were progressing smoothly. Catherine had moved in to help with the transition, and for the first time in his adult life, Michael felt like he was exactly where he belonged. But that afternoon, Dr. Chen would call with DNA results that would shatter everything he thought he knew about coincidence, destiny, and the true meaning of family. The 4 boys he'd rescued weren't just changing his life. They were about to reveal the most extraordinary secret of his past. The phone call came at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday while Michael was in a board meeting. Dr. Chen's voice was trembling with excitement. "Michael, I need you to sit down. The DNA results are back, and what I'm about to tell you will change everything." Michael's heart raced. "Is something wrong with the boys?" "No, they're perfectly healthy. But Michael, the 4 boys are your biological sons. The genetic markers are unmistakable. You share identical paternal DNA with Jimmy, Tommy, Danny, and Bobby." The world tilted. "That's impossible. I would know if I had children." "Do you remember a relationship about 6 years ago? Someone who might have become pregnant and never told you?" Rebecca. The memory hit like lightning. Rebecca Martinez, the brilliant pediatric nurse he'd dated 6 years ago. She'd left suddenly for Chicago, claiming a job opportunity, but she'd been acting strange before leaving. "Rebecca Martinez," he whispered. "Michael, quadruplets occur in 1 in 700,000 births. The chances of randomly adopting 4 homeless boys, who are your biological sons, are mathematically impossible. This wasn't coincidence. This was destiny." That evening, Michael sat Catherine down and told her everything. Her face cycled through disbelief, shock, and finally wonder. "Your biological sons," she breathed. "Michael, these aren't just children you're helping. They're your actual family. I keep thinking about Rebecca. Why didn't she tell me? Maybe she thought she was protecting you. The important thing is they're here now. Your sons are home." Michael hired private investigator David Chen to find Rebecca. What David discovered broke his heart. Rebecca had raised the boys alone in Chicago, working as a pediatric nurse. 2 years ago, she'd been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She'd fought for 18 months while arranging care for her sons. Rebecca had died 14 months ago. The boys had been placed with Mrs. Patterson, who suffered a stroke and was hospitalized. They'd entered foster care, been separated, and ran away 6 months ago to stay together. "She never put your name on birth certificates," David reported. "But her friends said she talked about someone named Michael in Boston. Said he was brilliant, successful, and she'd loved him but couldn't burden him with responsibilities he hadn't chosen." The next morning, Michael gathered all 4 boys in the kitchen. Catherine sat beside him as he prepared to share the most important truth of their lives. "Boys, I need to tell you something amazing about your past. Do you remember your mother?" Jimmy nodded. "Mama Rebecca. She was the best mama in the world. She got sick and had to go to heaven. She used to sing to us," Danny added quietly. "She taught us to be smart and safe," Tommy said. Bobby climbed onto Michael's lap. "Mama said someday we'd find our real family. She said love always finds a way home." Michael's throat tightened. "Boys, I found out something wonderful yesterday. Your mama Rebecca and I were very good friends before you were born, and there's something else, something almost impossible to believe." 4 pairs of blue eyes watched him intently. "I'm not just someone who wants to adopt you. I'm your daddy. Your real daddy." The kitchen fell silent. The boys stared at Michael with expressions of hope and wonder. "You mean our actual daddy?" Tommy asked slowly. "Yes. When your mama lived in Boston, we loved each other very much. But she moved away before she could tell me about you boys. She raised you by herself and did an amazing job." "So we're really your sons," Danny whispered. "You're really my sons, all 4 of you." Bobby wrapped his arms around Michael's neck. "Does that mean we get to stay forever?" "It means you're home. It means this is where you were always supposed to be." Jimmy stood and walked around the table. "Daddy," he said, testing the word. "Mama used to say our daddy was a good man who would love us if he knew about us. She said we got our blue eyes from him." "She was right about everything," Michael said, looking into eyes identical to his own. The adoption proceedings became a formality once paternity was established. Judge Elizabeth Warren said in 30 years. She'd never seen a family more clearly meant to be together. That evening, Michael arranged surprises. Sergeant Wells arrived with honorary junior police officer badges for each boy. Elena Rodriguez brought a proclamation from the mayor declaring their adoption day as Sterling Family Day. But the biggest surprise came when Catherine stood to make an announcement. "Boys, you're going to be big brothers. We're adopting a little girl named Sophia, and I'm also pregnant." The room erupted in cheers and questions. "Is our family going to keep growing?" Tommy asked. Michael looked around at his sons, his wife, and thought about the future. "Our family is going to be exactly as big as it needs to be to love everyone who needs loving." 2 years later, the Rebecca Martinez Foundation had grown beyond Michael's wildest dreams. What started as his personal mission had become a national movement with offices in 12 cities. "We've prevented separation of 847 families," Foundation Director Dr. Amanda Foster reported. "Our emergency intervention program has provided temporary housing for 312 single parents facing health crises." Michael nodded proudly, but his mind was on the afternoon celebration, the boy's 8th birthday. They'd requested to visit the restaurant where they first met him. As they drove downtown, Michael marveled at how much his sons had grown. Jimmy showed entrepreneurial spirit, selling handmade bookmarks at school with profits going to underprivileged children. Tommy had become a natural athlete and leader. Danny's artistic talent amazed everyone. Bobby remained the family diplomat, now learning multiple languages. Standing outside Le Bernardin, the boys looked at where their new life began. "It's weird," Bobby said thoughtfully. "If we hadn't been hungry that night, we might never have found our real family. Everything had to happen exactly the way it did," Jimmy added. "Your mama always said everything happens for a reason," Michael replied, crouching to their level. A well-dressed couple approached hesitantly. "Excuse me, are you the Sterling family? From the foundation?" The woman, Maria Santos, explained they'd been trying to adopt for 7 years and had just been matched with twin sisters through the foundation. "Being adopted is the best thing ever," Tommy told them enthusiastically. "The most important thing is to keep them together," Bobby advised. "Sisters need each other just like we needed each other." Michael watched proudly as his sons naturally comforted this hopeful couple, using their experience to help others believe in family. Later, they visited Rebecca's grave. The boys had chosen the headstone's words: "Rebecca Martinez, beloved mother. Love always finds a way home." Jimmy spoke for all of them. "Hi, Mama Rebecca. We wanted to tell you about our family. Daddy takes good care of us, and we have a new Mama Catherine and 2 little sisters. We help other kids find families now through the foundation Daddy made in your name." As they drove home to their birthday celebration, Michael reflected on their incredible journey. The miracle that started with 4 hungry children had become a legacy touching countless lives. 5 years later, 13-year-old Jimmy Sterling stood at Harvard University's Sanders Theater podium, addressing an audience of social workers, child advocates, and families who had been helped by the Rebecca Martinez Foundation. His 3 brothers, Tommy, Danny, and Bobby, stood beside him, all now remarkable teenagers who had grown into extraordinary young men. 10 years ago," Jimmy began, his voice clear and confident, "my brothers and I were homeless children living on the streets of Boston. We were cold, hungry, and afraid, but we had each other. Today, we stand before you as proof that every child deserves a chance, and that sometimes the most extraordinary families are the ones that find each other against impossible odds." Michael watched from the front row, his arm around Catherine, with 9-year-old Emma and 11-year-old Sophia sitting between them. The family had grown even more over the years. They'd adopted 2 more children through the foundation, Marcus and Lily, both teenagers who had aged out of foster care and needed a family to believe in them. The Rebecca Martinez Foundation had become a national model for family preservation and innovative adoption services. They'd helped place over 2,000 children in permanent homes, prevented the separation of nearly 2,500 families, and created the technology platform that was now used by social services agencies across the country. People often ask us if we remember being homeless, Tommy continued, taking his turn at the microphone. We remember everything. We remember being scared and cold and not knowing where our next meal would come from. But we also remember the lessons our first mother, Rebecca Martinez, taught us about staying together, being brave, and believing that love always finds a way home. Danny stepped forward next, his artistic eye evident even in how he approached the podium. We remember the night we met our dad, Michael Sterling. We were just asking for food, but he gave us something much more valuable. He gave us trust. He asked us to watch his car, and that simple act of faith changed our lives forever. Bobby, now 13 and nearly as tall as his older brothers, concluded their presentation. Today, the four of us are honor students. Jimmy has been accepted to MIT for early admission. Tommy is being recruited by college soccer programs. Danny's artwork has been displayed in galleries across the country. And I've been accepted to a summer program at the United Nations for young diplomats. The audience erupted in applause. But Bobby raised his hand for quiet. But our achievements aren't the real success story. The real success story is that we learned something on the streets that we're now teaching other children. That family isn't just about biology. Family is about choosing to love each other, protect each other, and never give up on each other. After the presentation, the family gathered for their traditional post-event dinner at Le Bernardin, the same restaurant where their story had begun a decade earlier. The maitre d', who had worked there for 15 years, always gave them the best table and never failed to comment on how much the boys had grown. "Mr. Sterling," he said as he seated them, "every time I see your family, I remember that night 10 years ago when you left your dinner meeting so abruptly. We thought there was an emergency." "There was," Michael smiled, looking at his sons, "the best emergency of my life." During dinner, the boys talked about their plans for the future, all centered around helping other children. Jimmy was passionate about developing new technologies to help connect families. Tommy wanted to create athletic programs for at-risk youth. Danny was planning a series of paintings about resilience and hope. Bobby was determined to work in international child welfare. "You know what's amazing?" Sophia said, now 11 and every bit as articulate as her older brothers. "All of you boys want to help other kids, just like how you were helped." "That's what families do," Emma added with the wisdom of a 9-year-old who had grown up in a house full of love and service. "We help other people become families too." Later that evening, as the family walked through Boston Common, Michael reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. The foundation had grown beyond his wildest dreams, but the real miracle remained the 4 young men walking beside him, boys who had transformed from homeless survivors into leaders, scholars, and advocates for children everywhere. "Dad," Jimmy said as they paused by the pond where Emma and Sophia were feeding ducks, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night? If you hadn't asked us to watch your car?" Michael considered the question seriously, looking at his 4 sons who had become such remarkable young men. "I think about it sometimes, but then I remember what your mother Rebecca taught you, that everything happens for a reason. I think we were all meant to find each other." That night, Michael received a letter that reminded him their work was far from over, from a single mother in Seattle facing her own crisis, asking for help, that reminded him so much of what Rebecca must have gone through. The foundation would help her, but her letter reminded Michael that there were still children sleeping in the cold, still families on the verge of separation, still love waiting to find its way home. On the 10-year anniversary of that snowy night that changed everything, the Sterling family returned to Le Bernardin for a special celebration. The boys, now teenagers with bright futures ahead of them, had organized a surprise for Michael and Catherine that would become one of the most meaningful gifts they'd ever received. "Dad, Mom," Jimmy announced as they finished their anniversary dinner, his voice carrying the same leadership qualities that had helped them survive on the streets. "We have something very special for you tonight." Tommy pulled out a beautifully bound leather envelope, his athletic build and confident demeanor showing how much he'd grown from the scared little boy who'd helped block car wheels with rocks. "Over the past 6 months, we wrote letters to every single family the foundation has helped, asking them to share their stories about how their lives changed," Danny added, his artistic sensibilities evident in how he'd designed the presentation. "We compiled all of their responses into a book called Love Always Finds a Way Home, Stories from the Rebecca Martinez Foundation." Every family wanted to contribute because they said our story gave them hope. Bobby smiled, his diplomatic nature shining through as he spoke. "All proceeds from the book will go directly to expanding the Foundation's work internationally. We want to help children all over the world find their families, just like we found ours." The book contained hundreds of testimonials from families who had been helped by the Foundation. Single parents who had avoided losing their children during health crises, siblings who had been kept together when separation seemed inevitable, teenagers who had aged out of foster care but found permanent families through the Foundation's innovative programs. Each story echoed the same theme. Love really could overcome any obstacle when people were willing to fight for each other. Later that evening, at the townhouse that had transformed from Michael's sterile bachelor showcase into a warm, vibrant family home filled with laughter, artwork, sports equipment, and the beautiful chaos of a large, loving family, the extended Sterling clan gathered for their traditional anniversary celebration. Sophia, now a confident 16-year-old who excelled in debate and had inherited her father's business acumen, served as the family's unofficial event coordinator. Emma, 14, had developed artistic talents that rivaled Danny's early work and was already talking about using art therapy to help traumatized children. Their two newest family members, Marcus, now 21, and Lily, 19, had found the stability and love they'd never experienced in their years bouncing between foster homes. "You know what I love most about our family?" Sophia said as they sat around the living room, the walls covered with family photos, Danny's artwork, Tommy's soccer trophies, and Jimmy's academic awards. "We prove every single day that families can be built through choice and love, not just biology." Michael looked around at his children, some biological, some adopted, all completely and irrevocably his. Each had brought unique gifts, challenges, and perspectives. But together, they had created something extraordinary that touched lives far beyond their own home. "Your mother, Rebecca, was absolutely right," he told the original 4 boys, his voice thick with emotion. "Love really does always find a way home." The Foundation now operated in 47 states, had helped over 500 children find permanent families, and had become the gold standard for family preservation services nationwide. Major universities studied their model, government agencies sought their consultation, and international organizations wanted to replicate their success in other countries. But Michael's greatest pride remained focused on the 4 young men who had started it all. Jimmy had not only been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship, but had already developed 3 mobile apps to help children in foster care connect with potential families. Tommy was being recruited by Division I soccer programs across the country. But he spent every weekend coaching underprivileged kids and had started a non-profit that provided sports equipment to low-income schools. Danny's paintings were being displayed in major museums, with his latest series titled Finding Home, inspiring viewers worldwide. Bobby had been selected for an international youth leadership program and was already being consulted by UNICEF on child welfare policies. But beyond their individual achievements, they remained devoted brothers who worked as a seamless team to help others. They spoke at conferences together, mentored children in foster care as a group, and never forgot where they had come from or how far they had traveled together. That night, as Michael tucked in Emma and Sophia, a ritual he had maintained, even as they grew older because it represented the security and consistency he wished every child could experience, and said goodnight to the older children, who were now too grown up for tucking in, but still appreciated the family time before sleep. He marveled at the incredible journey that had brought them all together. From 4 homeless boys asking for food to a family that had touched thousands of lives across the country, it truly was miraculous. Rebecca Martinez had taught her sons that love always finds a way home, and 10 years later, that simple lesson had become a movement that was proving every day that the most extraordinary families are often the ones that choose each other. 15 years after that fateful snowy night in Boston, Michael Sterling stood before the United Nations General Assembly in New York City, wearing his finest suit, but feeling the same pride he'd experienced watching 4 small boys protect his car with rocks and determination. Today, he was introducing the newest and youngest member of the UN Youth Advisory Council, his son Bobby, now 18 years old and the youngest person ever selected for this prestigious position. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates," Michael announced, his voice carrying across the massive assembly hall, "I have the extraordinary honor of presenting Robert Sterling, whose grassroots foundation work has helped reshape international adoption protocols and family preservation standards across 6 continents." Bobby approached the podium with the same quiet confidence his brothers had always displayed, but Michael could still see traces of the 5-year-old who had once climbed onto his lap and asked if they could stay forever. Now, that same child was preparing to address world leaders about protecting vulnerable families on a global scale. 15 years ago, my 3 brothers and I were homeless children living on the streets of Boston, Bobby began, his voice clear and strong. Today, I stand before you not as a success story to be admired, but as living proof that every single child in the world contains unlimited potential, just waiting for someone to believe in them. In the audience, Michael sat with his complete family, marveling at how far they had all come. Catherine, now 52, radiated pride as she watched their youngest son address the United Nations. Beside them sat Jimmy, now 23 and CEO of his own technology company that specialized in developing family matching algorithms used by adoption agencies worldwide. Tommy, 23, had become a professional soccer player who spent his off-seasons coaching at-risk youth in urban areas across America. Danny, 23, was an internationally recognized artist whose installations about resilience, hope, and the power of human connection toured museums and galleries around the world. Sophia, now 16, served as the Foundation's official youth spokesperson and had already been accepted to Harvard with plans to study international law. Emma, 14, was showing early signs of following her father into business while maintaining her passion for art therapy with traumatized children. Marcus, now 26, had become a social worker, specializing in keeping siblings together during family crises. Lily, 25, was finishing law school with a focus on family rights and child advocacy. The Rebecca Martinez Foundation had evolved far beyond Michael's original vision into a global network operating on 6 continents. They had helped place over 15,000 children in permanent, loving families, prevented the separation of more than 8,000 families during crisis situations, and created the technology platform that was now used by child welfare agencies in 43 countries. The Foundation's work had been credited with reducing international family separation rates by 30% in participating countries. But the real measure of their success wasn't in statistics or international recognition. It was sitting right there in that audience. A family that had grown from one man's chance encounter with 4 hungry children into a legacy of love and hope that literally spanned the globe. After Bobby's speech, which received a standing ovation and commitments from 12 countries to implement the Foundation's family preservation model, the family gathered at their hotel suite overlooking Central Park. Snow was falling gently outside, creating the same magical atmosphere that had surrounded that first night when everything changed. "You know what's truly amazing?" Sophia said, curled up beside Catherine on the sofa. "If those 4 boys hadn't approached Dad for food 15 years ago, none of the rest of us would be here. Emma and I might never have been born. Marcus and Lily might still be lost in the system, and thousands of other families around the world wouldn't have found each other through the Foundation. And Bobby wouldn't be addressing the United Nations about protecting children everywhere," Emma added, her artistic eye already sketching the scene of their family gathered together with the snowy city visible through the windows. Jimmy, now a successful entrepreneur, but still unmistakably the protective big brother, who had spoken for his siblings that first night, smiled at his younger family members. "Mom Rebecca used to tell us that everything in life happens for a reason, even when we can't see the bigger picture. I think she somehow knew that our meeting Dad that night in Boston was just the very beginning of something much bigger than any of us could imagine." Michael walked to the window, watching snow fall on the city below, thinking about all the children around the world who were facing the same fears and uncertainty his sons had once known. But thanks to the Foundation that Rebecca's boys had inspired, fewer children would have to face those challenges alone, and more families would have the support they needed to stay together during their darkest moments. "Dad," Bobby joined him at the window, now tall enough to look over Michael's shoulder. "The UN delegation wants to expand our family preservation model to work with refugee populations. Families who have been displaced by war and natural disasters need the same kind of protection and support we've been providing to domestic families." "That's exactly what your mother Rebecca would have wanted," Michael replied, putting his arm around his youngest son. "She taught you boys that love transcends all boundaries, geographic, cultural, economic, everything. She'd be so proud to see how you've taken that lesson and shared it with the entire world." As the evening continued, the family shared stories about their work, their dreams for the future, and their gratitude for the journey that had brought them together. Each child had found their own unique way to carry forward the lesson Rebecca had taught her sons, that love really does always find a way home, no matter how impossible the circumstances might seem. Later that night, as the younger children were getting ready for bed, Michael received a call from an old friend, Sergeant Patricia Wells, now retired but still in close touch with the family that had started her belief in everyday miracles. "Michael, I wanted you to know something interesting," she said, her voice warm with amusement. "That car thief, Marcus Rodriguez, was released from prison last month after serving his full sentence. But here's the incredible part. He's been asking to meet with your boys. What could he possibly want after all these years? He says that night changed his life too. While in prison, he read about your foundation and what the boys had accomplished. He completed his GED, then earned a bachelor's degree in social work through the prison education program. Now, he wants to help other former criminals rebuild their relationships with their families and communities." Michael smiled, shaking his head in amazement. "Even Marcus Rodriguez." The man whose attempted crime had revealed his son's extraordinary courage and character had been transformed by the ripple effects of that magical night. As he tucked Emma and Sophia into bed, a ritual he had maintained throughout their childhoods because it represented the security and consistency he wished every child in the world could experience, Emma asked the question that had become a family tradition. "Daddy, do you think we'll keep finding people who need our family?" "I think," Michael replied, kissing her forehead and smoothing her hair, "our family will always be exactly the right size to love everyone who needs loving." From 4 homeless boys asking for food outside a Boston restaurant to a global movement helping families worldwide stay together and find each other, the Sterling family had proven beyond any doubt that sometimes the most extraordinary miracles begin with the simplest acts of kindness and recognition of our shared humanity. Rebecca Martinez's legacy lived on through her sons, who had taken her fundamental lesson about love, always finding a way home, and shared it with millions of people around the world. The snow continued falling outside their hotel window, just as it had that first magical night 15 years ago. But now, instead of 4 children seeking shelter, the Sterling family was creating shelter, hope, and permanent homes for countless others, proving once and for all that love really is the most powerful force in the universe. Their miracle had become the world's miracle, one family at a time.